What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So it's our favorite part of the offseason. We get all the sneaky, delicious, juicy trade rumors circulating. They started early with our quarterback drama, and they may last and continue at a few different positions, honestly. And it all depends on how aggressive Joe Douglas wants to be while we work on retooling, rebuilding, and trying to get some life into this offense. So there's an interesting one that crossed my path. And that, with Corey Davis potentially being a cap casualty, what kind of replacements could we look at? And a lot of what I've seen, honestly, has been sticking to free agency and looking at somebody that can potentially replace all of the same attributes that he brings in terms of the run blocking, the clutch catchability, and then the leadership that he brought to this team, and maybe, excel in being able to stay available to the team in terms of their injury history, and maybe a little bit higher production. And we haven't really considered maybe we want to try to completely upgrade that position. In this case, it comes via trade. So there is the Bucs superstar wide receiver, Mike Evans, who's actually on the final year of a contract extension with the Buccaneers. And there was us as well as the Chicago Bears that got floated as potential trade partners. So let's kind of dive into the what, the why, and kind of a little bit about Mike Evans that will potentially make him a good fit and why this was even considered, right? So Mike Evans, he's long been extremely underrated in the NFL. I believe a lot of people haven't even necessarily mentioned him as anything close to being a top 5 wide receiver. Occasionally, you can see him not even making the top 10 wide receiver list in the NFL, depending on who you speak to. And it's very crazy to hear. Obviously, there's been an influx of a lot of young talent, but it's kind of crazy to consider the career that he's put up, and people don't speak to him in the same breath that they do with DeAndre Hopkins. And honestly, statistically, they're not too far off with DeAndre Hopkins only having a year over him. So career-wise, Mike Evans has put up 683 catches for 10,425 yards, 81 touchdowns, and he's done that at a clip of 15.3 yards per reception, which is phenomenal for a guy coming out of college that a lot of people thought was just going to be a big body chain mover and not necessarily have a minimal impact, but they weren't expecting as many of explosive big plays as he's been able to complete in the NFL, and he's done this with the likes of Jameis Winston and now Tom Brady. So not to say he's had, a smorgasbord of quarterbacks, but there's definitely a huge variation between Tom Brady being the pocket passer and Jameis Winston, who was probably the craziest gunslinger that we've had in the NFL for a couple stretches of years, who lived by the big play. And then even as far as this season, we're talking about him heading into age 30. We're looking at 77 catches for 1,124 yards, 6 touchdowns. He pulled those in at a clip of 14.6 yards per reception. So it's not like he's even fallen off a cliff for why we're considering this trade. It might not be the most elite production when you just look at the baseline numbers, but considering that a lot of people in NFL thought that Buccaneers offense was floundering, seeing him put up 1,100 yards, much like we kind of had with a Garrett Wilson, and this would essentially be a DeAndre Hopkins effect as well, is something that we could, hang our hats on. He would effectively become kind of wide receiver 1B to Garrett Wilson's 1A as the younger guy, fresher legs that can get it done. But Mike Evans will cause a litany of issues for a lot of people as that big body target that with the proven production we don't quite have. Hopefully Denzel Mims will be able to transform into a guy kind of like him, but we're still talking about two completely different skill sets and body sizes. Now, when we think about the contract situation for Mike Evans, we're talking about him being in the final year of his deal. Essentially, we're looking at June 1st. This is very much so an Aaron Rodgers kind of situation. If they do a cut or trade before June 1st, they're looking at a dead cap hit of $21 million. They're only going to save $2.3 million. So it doesn't behoove them to try to rush any deal. They can kind of get their ducks in a row, prepare for a life after Mike Evans, if this truly ends up being a legit move for them. Once June 1st hits, any cut or trade post June 1st, they're going to have a dead cap hit still, about 21.2 million, but that'll get spread out over 2023 and 2024. They'll also, in real time, see a cap saving of 14.5 million, somewhere in that range. So it seems like a very, very likely move, right? Much so like Corey Davis. It's not for a lack of production. It's not for a lack of health. Anything of that nature. Essentially, when you look at the fact of what the Buccaneers are dealing with, they're $55 million over the cap. They're going to need to make some moves. Chris Godwin is going to be eating up a chunk of change at the wide receiver position, and they may look to try to transform that offense depending on if Tom Brady runs it back or if they need to kind of look at the quarterback what free agency options they have, etc. And they're essentially going to have to clean house as best they can. Mike Evans just is, unfortunately a casualty of that situation. But again, you can always kind of finesse the cap. Maybe they find a way to keep him. But in a realistic world, that team is aging. They've seen their playoff window close. And this seems like the next logical move. Again, the Bears and the Jets were mentioned as the two primary trade targets this early on in the season, at least. And this is based on the fact that we both had two young quarterbacks in Justin Fields and Zach Wilson. But still, it makes sense, at least from the Jets' perspective, if we're retooling this offense under the guidance of an Aaron Rodgers or a Derek Carr, a Jimmy Garoppolo, whoever it is, this veteran that comes in, you still want him to have as many weapons as possible. So between Tyler Conklin, CJ at tight end, Garrett Wilson, you want him to have a strong running mate, especially if we don't keep Corey Davis. This is kind of the best of a situation that you can pull off if you want to start utilizing some of your draft capital as opposed to going back to the draft well and trying to find somebody early, much like we've seen with some of the mock predictions so far. And then again, we're talking about a one-year deal left for him. So when we want to talk about compensation, we have to keep in mind that there's going to be a contract extension that needs to essentially get ironed out. And then again, he's heading into his age 30 season. So this is where everybody becomes wary, even if you're still seeing high-level performances for people. General managers are always waiting for them to, that performance to kind of fall off a cliff. So compensation-wise, what this potentially costs in these early goings because of those factors I just mentioned, the sources say that at best maybe they get a second-round pick for a player of Mike Evans' caliber, which I would say sign me up for all day. This would definitely be a steal for us. And again, that's on the high end. I can easily see this being something like a mid-third, maybe a fourth-round pick and a later pick or a future pick, something to that effect. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Again, in my opinion, I would sign up for it. Let's dump all the resources that we can into this offense to give no excuse for them to hold up their end of the bargain while we ideally see the defense continue to crank out a top 5 performance behind the likes of Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, DJ Reed, while they're getting things handled over there. So let me know what you guys think. Crazy trade, waste of resources. You love the idea. Either way, I'll catch you guys again and appreciate the support as always. Peace.